Badger fans, what's going on? Another great episode of Locked On Badgers. We got Brian Smith coming on to talk recruiting, some of his favorite players from last year's class, and a receiver this year that's dividing people, plus a ceiling on Luke Fickell as a recruiter at Wisconsin. Where can he potentially bring this program? Great show today. A lot to talk about on Locked On Badgers on Wisconsin, and let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, your team every single day. And we're just going to jump right into it. We're bringing Brian Smith back on, Locked On's recruiting insider. And Brian, I had tremendous feedback from the last time you were on the show. One person even said, this is the best show you've ever done, which I've been doing this for like a year. So I'm like, oh man, I got to get Brian on here again as quick as possible. Welcome to the show again.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. That's pretty cool. I didn't expect that kind of feedback, but who am I to turn it down?
Nah, people loved it, man. I think we're smarter because you're here, and I appreciate you being here again. And I want to talk about, because again, as Badger fans, we're just jump right into it with a great guest. We don't waste any time. Let's get to the questions. Badger fans, we're obviously very hyper-focused on our team. Like, we're not looking at it recruiting as much from a big picture, strategic focus. You do that, right? That's part of your life. From a national perspective, where do you think Luke Fickell, because we haven't had a chance to talk about this, where can he bring Wisconsin as a recruiter? What's his ceiling as a recruiter at Wisconsin?
It's dependent upon the administration and his staff. And that this is a really deep dive. Somebody could do a dissertation on this kind of question. But the short of it is Wisconsin now has football history that they hadn't. Because when I was a kid, they stunk in the 1980s, and Barry Alvarez got there, and it was like, holy crap. If you get the right head coach, it's amazing what you can do because this place really loves football. He's a great coach. He took a bunch of 2- and 3-star kids at Cincinnati and not only won with them, they kicked the crap out of teams, and he put them in the NFL. Okay, so now he takes the Wisconsin job. Obviously better facility, the whole 9 yards, okay? The Big Ten, you have more money to disposal to give to coaches on your staff, recruiting staff, facilities. So that's good. The only question I have, and this is the same thing, I talked to a bunch of different people about this recently in the Big Ten West. They lose games in bowl games and big games because of what happens on the perimeter. They don't get enough speed at receiver and corner. It is the age-old thing, and Badger fans probably hate hearing it, but it's true. If they can consistently get some guys like that, because that's what they killed it at Cincinnati, and he took kids that other people didn't want. Sauce Gardner didn't even have an offer from Michigan or Michigan State, and he's from Detroit. That didn't work out well for the Spartans or the Wolverines, but it certainly worked out really well for the Bearcats. He has an eye for talent that other people just don't see, and he's just a hell of a coach. So that perspective's good. Now can he get a couple extra players? Can they find ways to keep his coaching staff there so they can recruit better, maybe take a JUCO kid, more transfers, just add more talent to the roster? The coaching is going to be just fine.
Let me ask you that because for a long time, Wisconsin has had that reputation, right? An eye for talent, finding players that are maybe overlooked, developing them. Can you win? I don't want to say even at the highest level, but yeah, can you compete at the highest level with the Ohio States with just the eye for talent mentality, we're going to do more with less mentality? Or do you need to start mixing in some 4-stars? And if that's the case, what's the ratio? That's obviously there's no perfect answer for that, but how many 4-stars do you need to start mixing in to compete at that level?
You got to get a weak quarterback play if you're going to compete with Ohio State. Here's something to think about. We all know who the 5 to 8 kind of programs are that are going to compete for the playoffs most years. They're not shocking. You can also look at about 10 schools in recruiting rankings, and it's the same. I know Badger fans do not want to hear that, but it translates, man. It translates. So to do it, you've got to be able to be better at quarterback. Think about the 2006. This is the most important game, in my opinion, the last 10, 15 years. When Clemson beat Alabama, and a certain guy who's now the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, I won't say his name because he's an idiot, but he's very talented. He won that game even though Alabama was the far superior. If you get elite quarterback play, you can do things that just control the game, bleed the clock, play fast, whatever you want to do. Wisconsin has to get to that. That's one. And then, if you get more corner help and more pass rushing help, just natural twitchy guys. That's the other part. There's no way around that. You can't just get 4-star offensive linemen. If I'll put it to you this way, we talk about this a lot as recruiting analysts. If you give me a 4-star offensive guard, and word only knows Wisconsin gets its fair share of those, but his talent is exactly the same as a 4-star free safety or edge rusher or corner, I'm going the other direction every time because they're rare. So I think that's what they got to do. It's not just 4-star, it's the position of the 4-star that Wisconsin needs to get. And I know I'm just preaching to the choir, but you got to do it because you're not going to consistently beat any of those 5 to 8 teams just by grinding it out and playing power football. Try running every down against Georgia and see how well that works. It does not. So they need more twitchy kids on the outside, on defense especially, but they need some speed at receiver too. And even if they just got 2 or 3 more of those guys in each class, it would completely change Wisconsin's roster because it changes how teams have to prepare for them every single time they go on the gridiron.
Well, and you mentioned just try running against Georgia when they know it's coming, trying to –
Yeah,
we've done that, though, against Ohio States and Michigans. We can't do it, right? Like, that's been the issue with Wisconsin is we just have been beating our head into a concrete wall, and that works when you play a Northwestern and a Ball State. But the elite games, we haven't been able to move the ball, which is why we've made this move. I want to ask you how much weight you kind of put into, I don't know, the 247 composite ranking, the rivals ranking, and then in that area, where can Luke Fickell potentially get Wisconsin? Can he get Wisconsin to a perennial top 20 recruiting program in composite rankings? Is that something that's attainable at Wisconsin, in your opinion, or would that require a big shift in the administration, the way they look at football?
I don't know if I would go big shift, but there is no shortcut to the following thing, and it'll piss off a lot of people in academics, but it's just true. You broaden your talent pool when you lower your academic standards. It is statistically fact. Wisconsin's an elite school. I had a coach once tell me that when he was at Wisconsin, it was harder to get kids in there than it was at Notre Dame. And I'm like, ooh. Those two things do not do well for recruiting defensive players in particular. Where does Wisconsin usually struggle? Corner, the end, etc. That's the same place Notre Dame does. So that, I mean, at some point you got to make an exception. Even if it's not across the board, you got to take a chance on a dude. You're gonna have to take the political hit. If you can't just get the kid that's got a 3.8 GPA that's 6'1", 185, good luck getting him away from Georgia, Alabama, Florida, LSU, Ohio State. We know where those kids are going. It's probably not going to be Wisconsin. So somebody close to that's an athlete, is a receiver that's willing to try corner, but maybe he's only got a 2.5 GPA kind of thing. They got to take kids like that sometimes. I don't think that's a huge risk because you're a state school with God knows how many counselors and tutors. How hard can it be? I think that's one thing they need to do. And the other thing, not all kids that go to a community college or junior college are bad kids. It's like a terrible stigma. Sometimes guys just developed late. There's a guy that's played several years in the state of Wisconsin for this team called the Packers. That's a quarterback that just went to the Jets. That was a community college guy. He was a late bloomer. Find somebody like that too. It could be at any position. It doesn't be quarterback. It doesn't be a Hall of Famer. But they've got to find ways to circumvent their roster that does not fit what the administration, quite frankly, wants them to do. If you're going to take that next step, there is no shortcut. They're going to have to take some kids that probably don't fit the traditional norm for Wisconsin. Like it, dislike it, I don't care. I've studied this my whole life. Teams with bigger academic purse strings, if you will, are the teams that usually end up at the top of their conferences and playing in the playoffs.
That's really well said. And it's something, listen, that conversation has been going back and forth inside Wisconsin fandom and this area forever, right? The inability we've seen, I won't name any names, but Wisconsin has seen players get not admitted, that players that have committed to Wisconsin not allowed in and then go to a Big Ten conference rival and get into that school. That's
a gut punch. That's because not only you don't get them, now you got to play against them. That's rough, bro.
Yeah. That's rough. I will say a lot of Big Ten schools do have a level of academic standards, so that's not the norm, but we have seen that, and that is tough. Let me pivot to this one. Assuming, let's just call it a level playing field. Let's say all the academics and administrative support is equal across the board. Which hire do you like more for a new school? Do you like the Matt Rule hire at Nebraska, or do you like the Luke Fickell hire? In a vacuum, which hire do you like more?
I don't think it's even close, and it's nothing against Rule. It's just I like Fickell because of the location of the school. I spoke to somebody recently that's coached in Nebraska. He flat out doesn't think you can get enough athletes there in today's modern society. Period. And it's somebody that has lived it. I know Nebraska fans will be inboxing me momentarily, but they have a bigger problem than Wisconsin. And it's not close. And not only signing kids, but keeping there, because the social networking and all that, the way that their school works, their state just doesn't fit a lot of the kids they need. Again, corner, D-end, they just can't get them and keep them. So I think Wisconsin is in a better shape, because how far is Madison from Chicago? How far is it from Detroit? You know what I mean? It's not like it's that bad, and kids can still go home and see mom if the weather's not that different. I mean, and Wisconsin's done a tremendous job for eons. Berry in particular is the one that got it rolling. You're getting Chicago kids, keeping most of the in-state kids home, etc. I don't think there's a way they're ever going to be great without that. That needs to stay the same. We'll talk a little bit about that, because Penn State's killing them right now with in-state, which is bizarre. But that I doubt that lasts very long. They need to get those 3-star kids that Fickell. I mean, again, he is a tremendous evaluator. He's proven it. He's putting guys that nobody else wanted into the NFL. That's as good as it gets. So his Saban-like, if you will, evaluation skills, and then you just add a couple more kids. I don't care if it's a New Jersey kid. I don't care if it's a kid from Miami. I don't care if it's a kid from Huntsville, Texas. Get somebody that's kind of outside the norm. The quarterback they got is from the Woodlands. I mean, they've gone everywhere. So we talked about the last time I was on your show. They just need to do that. So I think they're more sustainable than Nebraska, because, they are struggling in recruiting. And I think Matt Rule is a great coach. But at the end of the day, you got to have dudes. And he's just not going to get enough of them at Nebraska.
Well, and especially with this current staff, Luke Fickell, they've made a big effort to go into Illinois, to get back into Chicago, to reemphasize those areas. To your point, it's close enough. You should be able to do that. And there's a lot of talent there. All right, coming up, we're going to keep Brian Smith on the show. We're going to talk about a couple cornerbacks that were in kind of his backyard from last year's cycle. I want to get his take on DeCluna and Arnold, both early enrollees fighting in the 2 deep for Wisconsin. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our new friends and our good friends over at Birddogs, the ultimate comfort. I talked about on the last show how I was mistaken for a homeless man because I prefer comfortable clothes, and I struggle finding comfortable clothes that are also, they look the part, they look good. Birddogs has solved one of the biggest issues in my life by combining that comfort, that versatility with something that looks clean, it looks casual, it looks like you can go to places and not get mistaken as a homeless person. The other day I worked from home, my wife came over and I was Amazon shopping, and she said, "What are you buying?" I said, "Work clothes." And it was just basketball shorts. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you're de-evolving. You're turning into like a caveman." Birddogs is solving that issue for me. The ultimate in comfort, versatility, style, fit. They make me feel better. They make my legs look great when I'm wearing them. And again, it keeps me from being confused as a homeless person while I'm out and about. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Get a tremendous offer. When you enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. The ultimate in comfort and versatility and style. Birddogs, go there. You're going to thank me later. I want to thank everyone again for tuning into Locked On Badgers, for all the everydayers. If you're with us yesterday, we had Rajiv and Justin on the show. If you're with us tomorrow, I think we have a great interview with a former alumni. A lot coming up on Locked On Badgers. Thank you so much for tuning in. Brian Smith back on the show. Brian, I want to give everyone an opportunity. Where can they follow what you're doing? I know you're at camps, you're at practices, you're all over the place down there.
Yeah, man. I try to get to as many places as possible. I was at Miami, New Orleans yesterday. I'm going to IMG tonight. It's a lot of fun. May is the most important time in recruiting, not only for the college coaches, but for recruiting analysts like myself. Got to see the new guys, got to find out who's visiting and when, and it's kind of get the behind-the-scenes recruiting scoop. So FBScout_Florida on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. I'm predominantly on Twitter, but my YouTube page, especially now that I'm involved with you guys, is about to explode. So just a little heads up.
I love it, man, and we'll definitely be following along. I wanted to ask you again, especially being from the Southeast, seeing a lot of the players down there in that hotbed in person. Sure. Wisconsin brought in 2 corners last year's cycle, Jace, Arnold, Jonas, DeCluna. They both enrolled early. They've both been fighting in the 2 deep. They had a really good spring practice. Let's start with Jace Arnold. What did you see in his game when you were able to watch him, and what do you like about what he brings to the field?
Well, first off, he's from the ATL, and he played at one of those programs on the north side that when you go, it's so fun. They have so much money with the booster clubs and stuff in Georgia. When you go to their stadium, it's like, oh, I get it. I mean, they send kids to SEC schools, Big Ten schools, ACC schools every year. Like all the programs are right around where he's at, not just the one he was. So he's used to going up against guys every day. And I actually had him on one of my podcasts a year and a half ago, and real well-spoken kid. He'll fit in fine in Madison. And he just wanted a chance. He knew he was a little undersized, but he could really run, and he's very fluid. And again, he's been coached. I think he could play pretty early. So anytime you can get corners out of Georgia, it's a good start. And second off, he's a kid that's competitive and very intelligent, so he's going to fit the program and what Luke Fickell wants. So they did very well.
And you talked about he can run. We had I know you had mentioned that you were familiar with John Garcia Jr. He's been on the show before. Good dude. He said that Jace Arnold is as fast as just in terms of speed as any of the guys Ohio State's bringing in at receiver. The speed is legit.
Sure. It's a fact. And it's just that he's not 6'2". He's not the kid that LSU necessarily targeted, but they at least looked at him because of that foot speed and the GPA and the whole 9 yards. So is he the perfect corner? No. But they have found a gazillion different ways with different types of corners when Luke was at Cincinnati. They had some big guys, obviously, like Sauce Gardner, but they had a couple of guys that were under 6 foot that were successful as well. Maybe he's their nickel. I don't know. But Jace Arnold's going to play. They'll find a niche for him. Remember now, let's not overcomplicate it. Luke Fickell is a defensive guy. They're going to figure it out.
Well, I wanted to ask you about a guy before we move on to DeCluna, who had committed to Cincinnati and then followed Luke to Wisconsin, because Jace was a Paul Chryst guy. So that was the backstory there. I wanted to ask you, when you see a guy like Jace Arnold, who, as you mentioned, is a little smaller, 5'10", not a big build, 170-ish pounds, do you just instantly say slot corner? Is he kind of stuck into that type of mold?
It depends on the scheme you run, and it depends on your league. Like if you've got a couple of rival schools, like wherever you're at, that are 4 and 5 wide, then he can play. I mean, you need more corners than you're going to get for one, but he could play outside because a lot of those teams have 6 foot, 167-pound guys. So he could match up. It's the teams that are more the blue buds of college football that have the 6'3", 210 kid. Man, that's hard. If the ball's thrown pretty well, he's at a major disadvantage. So that's when he's more likely to move inside. But he's technically sound. So against like 8 out of the 12 teams on Wisconsin's schedule, I wouldn't have a problem with him playing outside. Michigan and Ohio State, and again, this is the bottom line, Penn State to a certain degree, that's a different deal. They're not going to just take away guys with the 5'10", 170-pound corner. They're not. So that's where they got to get some more size at cornerback. And he can move inside maybe, or maybe he plays a position where they're giving him some help with the safety over the top.
Well, then let's shift to Jonas DeCluna, who is also listed at 5'10", but has a very different type of build, longer arms, a little bigger. What was your take on DeCluna when you saw him, and then where do you think he plays out in the next level?
From a feistiness standpoint and just his style of play, he's a Southwest Florida kid. I saw him play 7-on-7, and I've seen his film. He is that – Florida kids, especially DBs, traditionally speaking, have a chip on their shoulder. And you've got to carry yourself differently to play corner because even Deion Sanders got beat. You're at a disadvantage on every single play. They know where the ball's going. You do not. So he's the kind of kid that can let it roll off his back and not care. You know what I mean? He just goes out and competes. And he'll get handsy with you. He'll press you. He'll be the guy that wants to kind of fight. He might be a nickel candidate. That's speaking like with Jace. I could see DeCluna doing that, especially against teams that have that real twitchy slot kid. Because like if you don't get your hands on that guy at the line, it's like chasing the rabbit. It doesn't end well. They might use him a little bit there too. And he'll be physical enough. They might use him some as a blitz guy off the corner slot or even as a nickel corner because he's a physical kid. He'll have some unique possibilities with what Luke Fickell wants to do.
That's well said. All right, we're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show. Come back with a receiver prospect that a lot of people are buzzing about with Wisconsin. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers with Brian Smith. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. And a quick second to say thank you again for tuning in, for making this one of your first listens, for being with us every day as we chop it up about the Badgers. I really appreciate it, whether I'm at my cabin, at the house, on the road, whatever it is, we're doing it together, and I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's bring Brian back on. We got one more segment here. Brian, I wanted to really pick your brain on a player who, I don't want to say polarizing, that's the wrong word, but there's people who look at Kyan Berry Johnson, the 2024 receiver commit for the Badgers out of Bolingbrook, Illinois, and look at the small frame, and they kind of say gadget guy. There's other people who say he's blowing up at camps, had a great job at a rivals camp. Tom Lemming just released a tweet that said, I love this kid. He is also the lowest ranked Badger commit in this class. If you look at the composite at an 86, it feels like opinions are all over on Kyan Berry Johnson. Where are you at on Kyan?
He's one of those kids, when you turn on the film, it's just fun to watch. You could be an Iowa or Minnesota fan who they all hate Wisconsin because you're all rivals, but respect the player because he just makes plays. Okay, that's first off. And there's one play that I was watching his film that is not synonymous with guys his size. They threw a fade ball to a kid that's listed at 5'10", and he's probably not that tall, if I was to guess. And he took it off this kid's head. Like, he's probably somebody that can dunk or at least come pretty darn close. And when you get guys like that, there's more possibilities. Are they going to run jet sweeps? Of course they are. But he's also not just some guy that's a gadget player in terms of just screens and reverses. He can catch the ball down the field, and that's what separates those big guys. It's why 40 times you're kind of goofy, especially with kids that are like 6'3", 210. I don't care as much. You can just throw it up and tell other teams what you're going to do, and sometimes that you're going to win. This young man can do that to a certain degree, and he's like 5'9.5" or something like that. They're going to find some niches with him. I'm curious. A punt return, he's the kind of guy, he's fearless. Put him at punt return. I mean, kickoff return's kind of dead in college football with how they changed the rules, but punt return, you can still do that. And he's a guy, don't be surprised if they ran him in Wildcat or did something else too. You never know. Athletes are athletes, and they'll find a way to get them on the field. If it's not already obvious, I have a lot of confidence in Fickell, but they need playmakers on the outside. So he's going to get more chances anyway. So I have a big thumbs up for him.
And this is a kid we talked about in the first segment of the show going into Illinois. This is another example of that with the staff. And a player going into Phil Longo's system. I think Badger fans are used to this. I mean, just because we've seen Paul Chris, Barry Alvarez, Brett Bielema, this type of offense for 20 plus years. This player probably wouldn't have fit as well in that style. But going into Longo's offense with space and speed and space, he feels like a really dynamic fit.
Josh Downs was a speedster for them that was not, I don't even know if he was 6 foot, and he found ways to get him the ball down the field, intermediate, across the middle, etc. Why wouldn't he be able to do it with a similar kind of player? I think this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. And once Wisconsin is able to throw the ball a little bit more, being kind than what they did with their last 3 coaches, it's pretty easy to say, well, really, in the history of the program, it's pretty easy to say they're going to be able to recruit a few more good receivers. Kids want to see it, though, man. They want to see it. And I can't blame them for that. So they want to see that you have a quarterback because receivers need to have that to be really successful. So this is a very important first year for Fickell in the offense. They need to be able to throw the ball even when other teams know they're going to throw the ball.
Yeah, that's certainly been an issue for a while in Madison. If you don't throw and other teams know you're going to do it. He is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
We'll do it again on Wisconsin, and we'll talk later.